Hi, welcome back. I'm here with Jess, Olanie, Elsner from Amazon Web Services. Jess, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing real well. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Now, you did an outstanding job sharing what insights you're generating there at Amazon. And obviously, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a top priority for all companies, and you all are no different. So, look forward to what you have to share. And I understand that you have a graphic that you're going to share with us. Is that right?
Yeah, I have a timeline from the last year. The premise of the conversation is really surrounded in how are we not talking about women at this point?
All right. Well, I'll leave it to you, and then I'll join you at the end to have a discussion about it. Sound good?
Definitely.
All
Yeah.
right. Talk to you in a bit.
February. I think it's February of last year, year to date. We were around 3% unemployment, and by April it was 14. And what you started to see was women reverting to gender norms, oddly, and it was not something people forecasted as a liability for women in the workforce. And so when it hit, it was very it depreciated the workforce substantially. And there was so much other noise, and rightfully so, that people didn't see what was happening to women in the workforce overall. And that is especially true for women of color, who are affected much more than white women have ever been. So when you look at the Civil Rights Act and you go forward year over year, you'll see that there was a time where women of color were making $7 a week and white women were making $40 a week. So when you look at 2020 collectively and say that the women all up are taking a massive reset back by 10 years, a generation, whatever the forecast is today, 1 in 5 women have left the workforce in total, and are not planning on returning. So the fact that people aren't screaming and yelling about this is bizarre to me. We are helping check boxes. And this is not, I will say too, that this is not Amazon data. This is not AWS. This is definitely a consulting company's data. But I had a gut instinct of what was happening in the workforce, and then randomly found a report that backed it all up. And so that's really where it started. But no one knew that 2 million women had left the workforce in a year in North America. And I was surprised, but I was more surprised that everyone else had no idea and that there weren't programs in place. So, so when they asked me to come back, this was the one thing I wanted to talk about because people aren't talking about it. And today there was a podcast by Reid Hoffman, who started LinkedIn, and it was about this, and it was exactly about why people aren't talking about this. So there's a great Masters of Scale episode today, but timely as always, because it is it's a massive pain point, and it's something that if not caught and reconciled to, the women that have worked so hard are going to pay a substantial consequence, and so are our daughters and granddaughters and so on and so forth. That's the forecast. And there just aren't additional returnship programs in place to compensate. And so it's pretty alarming that this is where we sit and no one is saying, well, yelling from the rooftops that this is a problem. So anywho, that's what I have is a big problem. And, you know, when I was like writing and journaling sort of like what I wanted to talk through, like the solution to me was first awareness, because I think from like myself, I should be one of the least impacted women. I have worked remotely for years. I have a flexible schedule. I could accommodate for things like Common Core math, although that's a ridiculous type of math. And I don't know why we had it, but like I don't have time to learn it in reality, you know, and yet I feel guilty for relating to the women who have left the workforce. And when they look at women who feel the burden of household responsibilities versus men who feel like they contribute equally, the women come in at like 44% saying that the men contribute equally. The men believe that they're contributing equally at 70%. And so there is a lot of stuff that's just being managed by women and not talked about. And I think that like we're just going to continue to see a downward spiral unless somebody starts to flag it. So that's what I'm hoping to share. And like, I think the only solution is really awareness. And, you know, of the State of the Union is terrible.
Yeah.
And we just have to acknowledge it and like pay attention and manage women once we get them in the door.
You know, with that in mind, thank you, by the way, for highlighting this, because it's obviously a massive challenge for all organizations, and AWS being massive like it is has a disproportionate both responsibility and risk of not getting this right. And so, being respectful of, your position there and not, wanting to compromise or not, being able to compromise or I don't want you to compromise anything. I want you to be in a comfortable place with what you share. My thoughts are, given your stage of life, given your location, given the work group that you're in, what do you see is necessary to address this problem systematically? And your response can be rooted in, yes, what's happening in your current organization or more broadly. But I'm just really interested is that you're absolutely right. There is a massive problem with, I just got off the phone last week with a woman who has 3 kids, one of which is 20-month-old, and she's taking care of her elderly parent, and her husband is home working as well. So I can only imagine the madness, within that house, day to day. So without compromising too much about her, she actually left the workforce for a bit, and just to deal with that, the challenge. But given the fact that we have to make money to survive in our society, and both parents in most cases have to work, particularly when you have 2 or 3 kids, it's going to be hard. So my pointed question to you, have you been a part of or become aware of in your research organizations that are looking at individual capacity, meaning what they can actually handle, regardless if they're a man, woman, or LGBTQ member? What can they handle day to day given their current reality? Because obviously women sometimes have more family responsibilities by choice than men, and that obviously compromises their career in some cases, fairly or not. That's a reality that we have to deal with. So, again, my pointed question, how do you want to see organizations deal with this?
Well, I mean, I would say that like women have more of the burden by like perception first and foremost.
Yeah.
It's not always by choice.
Yeah.
I mean, it is by obligation and the feeling that like it is your job to keep the duct tape and spit on the house while also contributing equally to the household financially.
Right.
And so like what I would love to see is people work back from like COVID expectations or like pre-COVID expectations to in a man, woman, child, I am indifferent, but the capacity like of human capital does not go above 100% ever.
Right.
So like if you expand the home front, no matter, like there's something else it has to give. And that has to be acknowledged and really like honored in conversation.
Yeah.
And when you look at like people, women who are reluctant to have conversation around the stresses that they feel, like women won't even tell their managers they have children. That's where we are in 2020.
Is that last comment, is that something that you're seeing because they feel that they're going to be penalized or biased in some way? Or what do you think? And yeah, I'll just let you answer that first.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I pulled that from the McKinsey, like the McKinsey report, like they did a great summary of women in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So I have that in the notes of that slide, the link to that PDF, but it's amazing and it's 100% on point. I was like, relate. And I don't have any business. I feel like I don't have any business relating. Because I've had it easy, you know, in theory.
You know, what's so there's two things. So, and as a woman yourself, you know, let's say you're in role, you're an organization, you have ability and influence, you've identified a problem. And through our discussion here, we're elevating awareness of the problem. These are things that we've either known intuitively or we are becoming aware of research like this. Then it invites the question, you know, how do we change culture? How do we change the mindsets around this? How do we remove that fear for expectant young mothers to not hide? You know, what needs to change from your perspective?
I just think it's like honest conversation. Like, you know, like the reality is sometimes when we hire, we have a lot of goals around hiring women and we get them in the door and we don't know what to do with them. And their scope is cut and they are considered to have less capacity than a man if they have children. Like, that's just real. And we have to work through that as like a conversation and an honest talk track without like fear of liability and, you know, retribution from a legality like perspective. Like people should be able to say to their manager where they're having a hard time without the fear of being tagged to like, oh, she's a single mother or she's whatever.
And this is happening not only with existing employees, it's potentially happening with those that you're recruiting, you being in talent acquisition or staffing. Do you sense, or maybe have you observed directly, women hiding their realities and just in order to get a job? And so here's the crux to it. I see many people, you know, putting up their best self just so they can get the job, and then they go in and the job is grossly inappropriate. And conversely, organizations are overselling the job, saying it's going to be all great, and then they get in there and it's not what they, you know, expected, either from a task point of view or from a cultural point of view. So I imagine the answer is yes. You've seen people kind of hiding what's really going on with them just so they can look good. Is that right?
Well, I mean, what I would say is like the like burden has been on men. Honestly, white men under 40, heterosexual white men. Like those are the hard people, right? Before COVID to like get a job.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're in the wrong classification. You're in the only unprotected classification.
Yeah.
But it's wrong. Like as far as like, and we're in a world where you can identify as whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have data that supports the spectrum. We have data that supports a box. And when we look at like progression as it relates to like cultural like norms, we're just not there.
Right.
And so like women are probably not being honest all the time, but like neither are men. And that's like the smart thing for men to do. It was.
Right. And okay. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I'm just curious from a systematic point of view, as we address this topic with the idea that we need to get to a better place. What can we do systematically to improve matters? And I guess it's arguably, I believe it was, I'm forgetting earlier in the day, but it was job descriptions are different than how you're marketing a job. And so, what I'm hearing is that we have to be more accurate and inviting in how we market a job, not just talking about, okay, it's going to be, 50, 60 hour plus a week, but opening it up so people, particularly women who are either thinking about having families or have young families, it's more inviting to them. Would you echo that, and would you add anything to that notion?
I mean, I think your like job description requirements are going to change with your organizational size. And again, like at Amazon, we don't look at EEOC forms prior to, we look at basic qualifications in relation to the resume, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because we are, we do federal business. Like I've always done work like that from a recruiting perspective. So it's always BQs, right, first. And then whoever meets BQs, you push them forward, period, end of story.
Got it.
Now, getting women to apply, no, I think it's more about like how you treat them once they're in the door.
Okay. And that speaks to the recruiter interactions, the interview process and all that. Yeah. Yeah. So as we start to wrap here, I'm just, how can you obviously you've done some research on this topic, anything that you want to highlight to, so listeners and viewers can go and learn more about this?
There's a great report from McKinsey of women in 2020 in the workforce. And it's got all the data. It's got women saying that they're telling their husbands that one of them has to quit their job and realizing that their husbands never considered it being them.
Right.
Even if the woman is a higher earner.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of amazing data there. What they do less of is really talk to the current crisis. Melinda Gates just put out an article today in the Seattle Times about it being a state of emergency.
Wow.
And again, there was a different podcast from Reid Hoffman on Masters of Scale. So I would say those are the reference points I would use. But the McKinsey report is pretty amazing.
All right. Well, we'll make sure to put it in the links as we get this discussion published. So, Jess, thank you for highlighting this and doing what you do. Any closing comments as we start to wrap up?
No. I just appreciate you having me and letting me share my gut with you guys because that's not my day today. But I get the landing space here. So good luck and thank you so much for the time.
Absolutely. All right. You be well and hope to see you before too long up there in Seattle. Stay warm. All right. See ya. Bye-bye.